Hello,
How are you?
I'm good. Are you Mary?
I'm Mary. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Excellent. And that's Alex's picture up there. Alex was hoping to join us momentarily, but he's actually traveling. Um,
Okay.
so, which is fine. I'm completely ready and prepared to introduce you properly and get this rolling. How are you tonight?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks.
Good.
I had my first two events, the book launch in Huntsville, Alabama, and then the newspaper here in the small town here did a paid for breakfast for people to come out, and it was incredible. I sold 75 books at the little small rural town here. So,
Fantastic. That must have felt good to have the support of your people.
you know, people I think don't realize they think it's a disadvantage living in such a rural area. We don't even have a bookstore, but it's really not. I mean, the people here are so incredible when it comes to support.
That's amazing. I read a book a few years ago now. It was I remember reading newspaper articles about it. It was called If You Lived Here, You'd Be Home by Now. And it was by a New York man who wrote kind of a disparaging article about a tiny little town in, I think it was northern Minnesota, saying, this was voted the worst place to live. And the residents very politely but sternly all reached out to him and said, you've never even been here, you know nothing about us. How can you say this? And they invited him to come and see. So he went and they rolled out the red carpet and he went back to New York and talked his wife into moving to that little town.
Wow.
And they lived there about 6 years. And so his book is all about, his wife had worked for the government, was so involved, and she didn't know if she'd have enough to do there. And when she got into that town and became involved at the local level, she found it so much more fulfilling.
Oh, it
Um,
is.
yes,
I
yes,
did an interview with Andrew Keene a few days ago, and he said, "I don't understand. Your whole childhood was all about escaping. You wanted to escape." He said, "Why would you move back there?" And I said, "I wanted to escape my dad, not the area. My
yeah,
dad's been gone 19 years, so it's always home. It's
yes,
always home, no matter where I've lived. So it's kind of like a magnet that just pulls
yes,
you back. But it's the kind of place where, I mean, if you grow up in a small rural town where everybody knows everybody back before the cell phone days, if you broke down on the side of the road, every car would stop. It was that kind of place.
hmm,
So, I mean, it's obviously changed with technology like everywhere, but it's still, I can't imagine living in a place like New York. I did go to Minnesota once years ago. I was living in Milwaukee and I went to Minnesota for a book event. Went up there to speak at a library, and it was December. And December in Milwaukee still not bad. January gets pretty bad in Milwaukee. I mean, I come from Alabama, so we don't have hard winters. So I get up there to Minnesota. It was right before Christmas, and I remember getting up in the hotel room. We got a hotel room that took dogs. And by the way, you may see tails go by here. I got 4 dogs here. I just took in 3 strays recently. And
oh, wonderful.
so we found a hotel that took dogs, and I got up that morning and I turned on the TV in the hotel room, and I'll never forget this. The weatherman is talking, and it was snow and ice already in Minnesota. And the weatherman said, "It's currently 2 degrees. It's going to warm up to 5 degrees today." He said, "By late afternoon, it's going to drop down to -2, but be careful. After that, it's going to get cold." And I'm like, "What's wrong with you people? You don't have to live here. It's the whole mindset. It's just incredible. -2 sounded pretty chilly to me."
Yes, yes. I am actually I'm a virtual bookseller for Skylark. So they're in Columbia, Missouri, and I live outside Chicago.
Okay.
And I'm only 15 minutes from the or 15 miles from the city, but we live in an unincorporated area. So we have a little, just a half acre, but we have chickens and a little tiny pond.
Oh, cool.
And it's a very small community. So even though we're a suburb of Chicago, I consider myself very much a country mouse and understand exactly what you're talking about. I've said that we're like Mayberry for all the good and the bad. If you sneeze, somebody from across town will bring you soup.
Right.
But they also all know your business.
Oh, yeah.
It was very
Uh,
hard to keep a secret here in this little town.
My ex-wife was from Chicago, and her first visit to Sand Mountain was in December 2005. And I remember we all went somewhere, my family, and we took her, and she was like, I don't understand. I have on 3 coats and I can't get warm. And, I talk about this in the book, the cold. People think of Alabama, you automatically think heat. The summers are unbearable, but the same humidity that makes the summers unbearable make the winters just bone chilling, especially on Sand Mountain. The mountain gets colder than anywhere else in the South. And it was just, my wife couldn't understand it. The humidity is totally different. So it was the cold that I had, my family struggled with, living in a little house with no insulation. I mean, the winters on the mountain were just bitter. So, but yeah, Chicago, I went a lot of times. I lived in Milwaukee. It was only 60 miles away. And my
Yeah.
wife's family lived in Chicago. So I got to know Chicago pretty well.
Okay. Yeah. So, and then I did spend 5 years in a small, big land-wise, but small town of Grand Junction, Colorado. And that's on the western slope, and tiny little, there were, I call it tiny because I went to high school out there and I had 300 in my graduating class. And then I moved back here during senior year and had 1,100 in my graduating class.
Wow.
So I've lived in both worlds.
Let me ask you a question while we're doing the test here before we get
Sure.
started. Can you hear my fan?
No,
Okay,
Nope.
it's okay.
it's
Okay,
all
it's
good.
Alabama, so I could turn it off if you could hear it. I wasn't sure.
No, I can't hear it at all.
When I was going to school at Auburn, there was a girl living below me in the apartments, and I got to know her pretty well. And one day she wanted to show me her yearbook, and it was, an inch thick. And it was, she went to school in Birmingham and had a class of about 850. And I said, wow, it's just incredible. And she said, do you have your yearbook? And I said, yeah, let me run up and get it. So I go up to my apartment, I come down, and it's about, almost a 1/4 inch thick. And she just couldn't believe. She said, that can't be your high school yearbook. And I said, oh, no. This is kindergarten through 12th grade. We had 65, I think, in my graduating class. And I tell people jokingly that the only reason it was so large is because the school 6 miles away, Henniger, it burned down back before I was born, and they only rebuilt it to the 9th grade. And after that, Henniger students have to take buses all the way to Sylvania to graduate high school. So in 9th grade, our classes double in size. So instead of having 30 something, we had 60 something. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Those are small classes. Our Valley in Grand Junction there were 2 high schools in the Valley. But back here outside Chicago, I had 2 campuses for my high school. And I mean, it was just, to me, it was like looking at a college campus compared to the school I'd come from.
Our school was one building. The downstairs was elementary, the upstairs was high school. And then we had a separate, the gym was made under that. The only thing separate, we had a lab building that was built probably in the late 70s. Somehow they got money to build. It had 3 classrooms in it, was all, but this were the science teachers. You had the lab desk in one of the rooms, with the faucets, and so you could do the lab experiments and stuff. And but that was our school was one, and it hasn't changed much since all that time. We were a 1A school, which the Alabama ranking system went 1A to 5A. So we were the smallest school size in the state.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I was just, I'm amazed at the sizes.
It's very rewarding. I mean, everybody I went to school with knows I wrote a book. If somebody graduated with a class of 1,000, how many in that class would know you wrote a book? A handful of your close friends. Here,
Yes.
everybody, not just everybody in my class, probably everybody that went to Sylvania I got a call just the other night from a guy I graduated 5 years ahead of me. I never knew him. He was older. I don't think I've ever spoken to him. And he just calls me out of the blue and says, "Man, I saw you on Channel 48 News." I said, "That guy went to Sylvania." And he said, "We just got your book in today. We ordered it." And he just on and on about it, And I said, "Well, have you read it?" He goes, "No, my mom stole it from me, because she recognized some of the names and pictures in it, and she took it. But I'm going to read it as soon as I get it back from her." But that's the kind of advantage you have in such a small area.
Yeah, sure. Sure. It's it can be a true gift to have that many people know you. I was the blessing and curse of social media. The blessing is I've been able to contact and connect with people from my small town school in Grand Junction. And I don't know, I went to junior high and high school out there, but I formed some probably tighter connections than I had even back here.
Right.
That small town again. Yeah, it's incredible. Well, I think we're 2 minutes from start time. I see people are starting to come in. Because Alex isn't here, they usually kind of run the background stuff. So I see Debbie and Helen here, and I'm not sure if we are already visible to them or not. I haven't seen any messages come through, but no matter, it's all good. So I'll do an introduction, talk about Skylark. I'll read your bio, go into my questions from this amazing book, and then oh yes, okay. Hi.
Alex said all is visible.
Yeah, all right. So I'll wait till the 7 o'clock mark just in case Debbie's got her hand up too, just in case anybody is joining right at the 7 o'clock hour, and then I'll start us officially. So after I go through my questions, then we'll jump into any questions that our attendees might have. And yeah, I see we are live on Facebook and people are rolling in. Welcome everyone. Welcome to tonight's amazing event. Glad to see you all rolling in. Like I said, I'll give it another minute or so and let everybody jump in here. I guess we're at 7. All right. So good evening and welcome to tonight's event. My name is Mary Weber O'Malley, and I am Skylark Bookshop's virtual bookseller. Skylark Bookshop is located in Columbia, Missouri, and owned by author Alex George. Skylark has been here for 4 years, and in my humble opinion, is the most photogenic and charming bookstore anywhere, and filled with amazing booksellers. Please head over to our website for all of our wonderful upcoming in-person and virtual events and other wonderful activities going on at Skylark. We hope that you'll support us by purchasing a copy of tonight's title, With the Devil's Help, from our store. In doing so, you are supporting a wonderful small business and ensuring that we can continue to bring you wonderful authors such as tonight's guest. Also, anyone purchasing a copy of Neil's book from us will receive a signed book plate. And now on to our main event. Tonight, we are thrilled to welcome Neil Wooten. Neil grew up on a pig farm on Sand Mountain in the northeast corner of Alabama. The first person in the history of his family to finish high school, Neil went on to graduate from Auburn University with a BS in applied mathematics. He became a teacher and a director of a math school in Milwaukee, winning numerous math awards. He is now the managing editor for Mirror Publishing, a contributor to the Huffington Post, columnist for the Mountain Valley News, curator of the Fort Payne Depot Museum, creator of the popular Facebook comic strip Brad's Pit, and a stand-up comedian. As we move through tonight's interview, if you have questions for Neil, please do put them into the Q&A, and we will get to those after we chat for a bit. So Neil, welcome. We're so thrilled to have you here tonight. Can you start by telling us a little about your amazing book, With the Devil's Help?
Well, thank you for having me, Mary. The book is my first work of nonfiction. I've had 18 books of fiction published, and this was my first attempt at nonfiction. It's especially the story of my family, my granddad. In fact, the chapters kind of intertwined between my life and my family and my grandfather's. When I was a kid growing up on the mountain, we were always followed by a black car with men in black suits. And when you're a kid, you think things are normal. Like I thought growing up and having to go down into a hollow to get water to drink, and bathe with, I thought, that was normal. And I thought this car with these mysterious men that followed us everywhere, sometimes they watched us with binoculars, sometimes they would knock on our door and it would result in some kind of confrontation between them and my dad. I thought it was normal. I often wondered if my friends had the same men follow them or their own car with men in black suits. I didn't know. And of course, we find out later, as it says even in the blurb of the book, is my grandfather was convicted of murder, and he was sent to prison, Kilby Prison, which was a state penitentiary back in the early 60s. And he was only there for 2 years. And we still don't know exactly how he became a trustee, because if you've seen any movies or read enough books, you know that they only do nonviolent offenders, the ones with too many traffic tickets or maybe the marijuana charge or something, are the ones they make trustees. So how he talked himself into it, him and my dad both were just charmers. Besides having incredible tempers, incredible strength, and incredible speed, they're very charming. They knew how to read people. So somehow he talked himself into becoming a trustee. And one day they dropped him off at the warden's house with a lawnmower and a gallon of gas to mow the lawn. And he decided it was too pretty a day to mow. It was too pretty a day to be captive. And he just walked away. He facilitated his own release a tad early. And apparently we would learn the FBI kind of frowns on that. And I don't know if it was FBI. I call them agents in the book, but I'm really not sure if it was FBI. I don't know if the ABI, I haven't been able to track back the record to see if the ABI was around. And it could have even been a prison bureau, had their own agents. I don't know who they were, but they knew my dad had helped, and that was their only lead. So they tried everything they could to try to catch them slip up, so they followed us, and I just thought that was normal. So that's a big part of the story.
Absolutely. I was riveted from the first page to the last page. And as you said, you alternate chapters between yourself and your grandfather. Tell us how you were able to write from your grandfather's point of view.
Well, I didn't write from his point of view. That book is actually only told in first person on my chapters as a memoir. The even number chapters is more like a novel might be told, because I only knew the stories of my grandfather. So all the stories are true, maybe feelings and certain conversations, of course, I just had to imagine, but I knew all the stories. I knew about him stabbing his wife and exactly how that happened. I had all these stories about him. I don't know how it came to be but because the rule, it's one of those rules in writing that you don't do. A book needs to be told from the same perspective all the way through. So I broke one of those rules, and one of the unwritten rules is, if you're going to break rules, you better be smart about it, so I hope I pulled that off. Everybody that has reviewed it, all the major folks that reviewed it, really liked that I did that. And the book actually ends, I don't know if you noticed, it ends exactly where it begins, with exactly the same 2 words, knock, knock, so I thought it was kind of clever, but I didn't know how to tell a memoir and covering all my grandfather's life. So I just decided to do it that way. And so far it's gotten a great response from it. Yeah.
It really, it works. It just works. It's seamless. Uh, I just could, I read this in like 2 sittings. I could not walk away from it. You talked a little bit about thinking it was normal to go down the holler and get your water. You lived, this almost secret existence in a shack in the woods. You had no running water, no insulation, and only now and then electricity. And you talk, you said until you know better, you think it's normal. So did you realize that you were poor? And when, if not right away, at what point did you realize that people don't all live this way?
Well, we visited relatives. Nobody visited us. Dad didn't allow people to come there, but we would visit relatives. And the fact that they had a bathroom in their home, I thought was the most incredible thing ever. And I didn't know everybody had them. I just thought my aunt, especially, and my Aunt Esther, that's where all the family would go for the reunions and stuff. And I'm like, and I thought she lived in a mansion. The house was probably about 700 square feet. It's a tiny little house. I drive by it now and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this place. But in my mind, it was just incredible because they had that magical bathroom indoors, and she had that metal box in her living room, in the window of her living room, and it threw out cold air. I never in my life imagined that things like that existed. So I knew we were different to a degree, but I didn't really think about it as being poor. I didn't think about it as being a financial thing. I just thought certain people, just a few, I didn't know everybody out there had stuff like that. So no, I didn't know really. I didn't ever put it together as being poor.
And there's quite a thread of mental illness and violence that run through this book. A cycle, throughout your family that just seemed to perpetuate. How did that affect your childhood?
Well, again, you don't really know that things are not normal, so that was just our life. I don't know for sure that Dad was bipolar or manic depressive, as it was called back in the day. We never heard those terms, but the fact that he was very loving and caring 80% of the time. He was just over. I mean, he was, a big hugger, he is just when his temper controlled him. And when his demons took control, he was just very, very violent. And then as soon as it was over, he would forget about it right away and expect you to. And I mean, I can remember, I don't know if this is in the book or not, but when I was 9 years old, for a very short time, we lived over in Rome, Georgia. And I played baseball over there. I played baseball every year from the time I was 6, but I played baseball over there. And one year, Dad was taking everybody to a convention. He worked selling this stainless steel cookware when he wanted to. And I didn't want to go because we had the playoff game, so the coach said I could stay with them. So I stayed with the coach, and he's had an only son who was my age. We were on the baseball team in school at Cusa Middle School in Rome together. And I just remember being so shocked. I thought there was something wrong with his dad, because we're sitting around the dinner table that first night, and the son is getting so excited and telling about me and him fishing, and he knocks over his glass of milk. And I'm like, uh-oh. And his mom and dad laughed about it and cleaned it up. And I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong with them? There was no violent reaction to that. So I even remember I didn't want to tell the other guys on the team. I didn't want them to think bad about the coach. I thought he was the weird one. And he would talk to his son about his day, and they would have these father-son bonding moments. And I just thought that was the most unusual thing. But I thought they were the weird ones. Like I say, you think things are normal that you grow up with. You don't know any better. But the violence was, it was daily, and sometimes more than once a day, but I didn't know it was, I just assumed because Dad was such a strong person, that it was just I figured it was just a little different for us because he was so so strong, probably the strongest person I've ever known, probably the smartest person in math. I was very good in math. I was on the math team in our little school and won first place trophies against major schools like the ones we were talking about earlier, the big schools. But my dad was sharper, so uh, but yeah, I didn't know it was that different. I just thought we had it a little rougher than everyone else.
I know there was one experience that you talk about in the book where whenever you or your sister needed to use the outhouse, you'd go together so that one of you would go in and the other one would stand guard against panthers or bears or anything that might attack as you were walking to and from. And one night you thought it was a black panther. This was the night it was finally happening, but it turned out to be your father playing a joke on you. Did these kind of things happen all the time? Was this, and
That
he
was
truly thought it was funny?
Oh, it was hilarious to him. This keep in mind, this was only at nighttime that one of us stood guard. When one of us had to go to the outhouse at night, and which was it was a horrible experience. An outhouse was a horrible experience anyway, but to have to go in the middle of the night when it's just pitch black on the mountain, and there were a lot of animals on the mountain, but yeah, we knew probably deep down that it was him, but he could do a panther scream, and there were panthers on the mountain, as in cougars and such, not black panthers as in jaguars or anything like that. But he could do a scream that was so identical to what sound they make, and it was scary death. Oh, he hid constantly. To this day, when I meet somebody new, for example, and they may just reach their hand over to do something, and I jump, and they're like, "What's the matter with you?" And I always have the same response. I said, "My dad spent my childhood honing my fight or flight reflex. To this day, I'm the most easily startled person you can imagine. Everything startles me." But yeah, he did that. That was constant. That was every day. If he had his hiding places and he had his sounds he could make, and yeah, he just thought it was hilarious.
It reminds me of when I was little, my mother's favorite movies were the Pink Panther movies, where he
There's
would
always
have
hiding.
his butler like hide and always try to attack him so that
Yeah.
he could do the same thing. And reading that, that's what it brought to mind, that you were going through your own Pink Panther training, whether you wanted to or not.
He scared me so bad sometimes that I couldn't do anything but crawl after it. I mean, it just
Oh,
exhausted all your lungs, when you scream. And I was literally just crawling, and it was hilarious to him.
oh my
And
goodness.
it is funny though. I mean, that is funny. I mean, everybody loves to hide and scare somebody on occasion. He just really took it way overboard. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that night in particular, I just remember so well because I don't mention in the book because we had actually already been talking about panthers because I had found a puppy. It's come out of the cornfield one day, and it was a Great Dane puppy, so it was huge. But when it ran out of this puppy ran out of the cornfield, I thought it was a black panther. It was solid black. And it turned out belonging to a cousin, and that's not saying much. Almost everybody on the mountain is a cousin. I mean, I have literally thousands of kinfolks, but we had already had panthers on our mind, because of that puppy. And my cousin came and got it later that night. So late in the night, when me and my sister had to make that trip, panthers was already on my mind. So when Dad did that scream, and yeah,
Oh,
he was an artist at that too. Yeah. I don't have regret those parts of my childhood really. I mean, I don't think that led to my nightmares and stuff as such. I thought it was funny too, even if I was the recipient of the fear of the startling, but if I was the target, but I don't really regret that part of my childhood. That he did that for fun. That was not in anger, so I could live with that.
I imagine if it was that or angry attention, that type of attention would be much more
I'll
preferable.
take the scaring any day. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So as a child, you were an award-winning artist and a math whiz. Um, you were the first person in your family to graduate high school. At what point did you kind of look at what you were doing and realize that maybe these were things that could take you further than anybody in the family had gone scholastically?
Well, let me make a correction. That bio is wrong. My mom graduated the same high school I did. She didn't go
Okay.
anywhere after high school, but 23 years earlier, she graduated from Sylvania High School too. I wrote in my bio that I was the first one to go to college, and I don't know if my publisher messed that up. So I just want to be clear there. But my two older sisters, they went back
Okay.
after me and finished school and went on to college and did great things. And my sister and little brother followed me into college too. So I was the first one to go to college. I'll be honest with you, this is a very weird thing. I had friends, I knew everybody in my class, of course, being a small school, but we weren't close to any of them because, again, I couldn't bring people over. So even when they got to that awkward age where they started having parties and stuff and dating others, I was not, part of any of that. I was not really allowed to be. I couldn't join any organizations like 4-H or Boy Scouts or anything. So I was never really a part of that. And I didn't know. It was really only later on in school when we had the math teacher who became the sponsor of the math team. Her name is Tony Niblett. Terry Niblett, her husband, was our science teacher. Incredible, both of them incredible teachers. And she saw something in me that no other teacher had ever seen or bothered to look. She said, "This guy," because when it came to math, that's about all she cared about, in life was math. So when somebody comes along and he has this ability to learn, I got so much attention from her, and it was new to me. And it was really because of her that I went to college. I didn't think I was allowed to go to college. I was just a dumb hillbilly that, I was going to get a job in the valley working in a hosier mill or become a farmer. And I really didn't know. And it really wasn't until I got to college that I realized, I don't know how to word this without sounding arrogant. I realized that I did have things to offer, my sense of humor, my intelligence, my artistic ability, and people outside of school later on were just amazed at some of the things that I could do, and that was a new feeling for me. So from that point on, my life really changed, I think. And I have been nonstop ever since. I was in a movie with Danny Trejo. Yeah.
Now, I didn't see that in your bio. Do
No, I
tell.
didn't put that in the bio. I did some really big things with comedy. I was on HBO once, and some of the things that I have a comic strip. I think it may be mentioned there, the Brad Pitt. To tell you
Yes.
what's going on there, we had a meeting with Disney Plus. The comic strip in South America, it's been more popular in South America. There are people get tattoos of my pit bull named Chief on their bodies, and they send me pictures, and it's been in a lot of magazines. But there's a production company. It's called Pancho El Pitbull in South America, and there's a production company in about, what is today say, about 2 weeks from now. A production company in South America is investing all their money. I mean, they're putting up all the money to do to make a 30-second test animation. They're going to hire voice actors. They're going to hire musicians to do the score and to make a test animation to present to Disney Plus. And since we've already had a positive meeting with them, and of course they say if it doesn't sell to Disney Plus, there's dozens of other studios. So
Sure.
to think that this little cartoon we started for fun almost 8 years ago could wind up being a animated movie, it's just incredible to me. So
That is just amazing. Because when I was reading your bio and what you've accomplished, I mean, your childhood can be called many things, but funny is not a term that came up in my mind as I was reading so much of this. But you have said when you exist in a violent and unstable environment, humor often becomes a refuge. It is the only thing that makes life bearable. Obviously, through a lot of your experiences, you had to keep a sense of humor. At what point did you take your show on the road and get up on stage and think, I can make people laugh?
well, humor was a big part of our life. I mean, we had as a matter of fact, we would get in trouble for laughing so much as kids, and we would get you know, whipped severely for laughing so much. But Dad had a great sense of humor. Dad loved making people laugh. He just didn't like people laughing if he wasn't the cause of it, you know. So, but I was 22 years old. I was in between college. I went back to AUM, Auburn University in Montgomery. But before I ever went back to AUM, I was watching TV one day, and they showed a commercial for the comedy club in Huntsville, and it flashed up open mic night Thursdays, and I went, "What does that mean? Is there a place I can go and do this?" So I traveled over there. I called the owner, and he wanted me to come in and do just a short audition, just to do a free open mic night. You know, there's a big comedy club there. So I go over there. The guy's name was Brian. I don't remember his last name, a nice guy. So I go over there and he goes, "Okay." He turns the spotlight on the stage and he says, "All right, go on." I went, "Go on?" No, I had to get up there and do like a 5-minute routine in front of one person. And the thing you'll learn about comedy is the more people you have, the better the show will be, because laughter becomes contagious. Some people laugh so funny, people start laughing at other people laughing. And so to go up there, people, they talk about it's the hardest profession, and it is. Don't get me wrong, get on that stage, it doesn't bother me now, but way back then, get on that stage in a new city and a new crowd is challenging, but nothing. That's still today, to date, the hardest thing I've ever had to do, get in front of one man. And of course, I couldn't hear if he was laughing even.
Right.
And after the show, he tells me, he goes, "Yeah, you got some good stage presence, good material. Come back Thursday night." And that's how it started. And pretty soon I'm doing open mics, and then pretty soon I'm traveling all over the Southeast. And I got on with a booking agency out of North Carolina called Creative Entertainment that booked comedians, and they're still around. They do more than comedians now. They got a different name, but they were out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and they booked a lot of my shows. And it's an interesting job. As I think I describe it in the book, it takes a familiar relationship with solitude. It is such a boring. I mean, imagine traveling to a town where you know no one, staying in really crappy hotel rooms, and working 30 minutes to 45 minutes a night. That's it. You get to know some of the other comedians, you get to know the club owners, but it is really the most lonesome thing you can imagine. Now, I guess if you ever get big and you start doing sitcoms and stuff, I'm sure it changes, but
Sure.
that's very rare. So it's really just the most lonesome profession I've ever had.
Yeah. There was another book about a magician on the amateur circuit that described that exact same thing, just town after town, forgetting what town you're even in, hours and hours just by yourself, and then you're on stage and you have to be on for that short little time.
And what I learned that surprised me was a lot of the comedians I worked with, very professional, didn't seem to have a sense of humor. As soon as you would go have dinner with them or go to a bar and have a drink with them after the show, very dry. But when they get on that stage and clock in, so to speak, just transform and just turn into these that you would think are, very funny people. But and they may be, but when I knew them outside of the stage, totally different. So I don't think it's a profession that people have to have a great sense of humor to do. They just need a sense of timing and be bright enough to come up with some material. And a comedian's act stays pretty much the same. Occasionally they'll try new material, especially if something happens in the news. And if it doesn't go over well, they won't use it again. If it goes over great, they may cut out something that's not quite as funny. So it evolves very slowly, So, so it was quite a experience to do. I had a chance to work on a cruise ship as a comedian, but I get seasick in small boats, and I just didn't think I could do it. So I backed out at the last minute, but it probably would have been a cool thing to do. So
yes, I would imagine so. You talk about your dad and how he was with your friends, how when your friends were there, he was patient with them. He took his time teaching them things. He was funny, which was so completely different with how he was with you and your siblings when it was just you guys. how did you feel about that change in him in front of other people?
That was not a shock to me. I kind of make it sound like that in the book, but the thing about Dad and Pete, my granddad, they were very charming. Like I said, I've had relatives contact me. It took me a year to write the book before I ever started getting it clean and getting it and found an agent and all that. It took me about a year to write it. So relatives knew I were writing it, and I would get messages or phone calls from them going, "Oh, your dad and granddad they were such wonderful people. I'm glad you're writing about them." I'm like, oh, they are going to be so shocked when they read this book, and even people that are in the family never saw that,
Sure.
people very close to us did. But yeah, some people just and there was this lingering doubt, that Pete really didn't shoot. Pete, my grandfather, really didn't shoot his son-in-law. And I don't know, at least 8 relatives called me up to tell me, you know what really happened, don't you? And they were different each time. And I'm like, I really don't think that's, and I would just say, oh, okay, but they weren't there. But as it turned out, and I had no idea, there's an eyewitness to the murder still alive today. And it was my aunt, Eileen. It was her husband that was shot. Her oldest daughter, who I had never met, was 11 years old, and she was there that day. And we had lunch while I was writing the book. She didn't want me to add that to the book, but she said, "You have it exactly how it happened." And I said, okay. That's what I knew I probably did, but I didn't realize there was an eyewitness alive today because that was 1962.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think we're giving any spoilers about the fact that he shot his
Right.
son-in-law over a dispute over potatoes,
Potatoes. Yeah.
of all things. Um, Now, there is something that I don't want to give a spoiler on that you find out later in the book, but outside of that big spoiler, were there other things that you found out about your family that really kind of surprised you as you were doing the research and talking to all of these relatives?
No, I pretty much knew the story. My mother had it all in her head. She had told me the stories about Pete stabbing Elsie, his wife, over a stupid thing about a knife, and that all played out exactly how it reads in the book. So mom was a big source for a lot of it, how Pete met Elsie and how it evolved from there. And so no, the only surprise in the book is a surprise I learned when I was 13 that
Yeah.
everybody learns in the last chapter of the book. And that absolutely floored me. But everything, once I learned that secret, everything made sense. Everything fit into place after that.
Sure.
But no, I wasn't very surprised about uh, things, I had already known all the things, I pretty much knew everything. I just had to get it into a book format that worked somehow to include my life and my grandfather's. And that's how I came up with the idea to do the alternating chapters.
Yeah.
But no, there was no big surprises for me.
And how did your mother feel knowing that as she's telling you these stories, once she knew this book was in progress, how did she feel about having these stories put out into the world?
I think her exact words were, "Oh my God, you're going to air our dirty laundry." I think that's exactly what she said. And I said, yes, yes, I am. My dad's been gone 19 years and my granddad's been gone 43 years. And I keep thinking they're going to show up and be really upset about this book, but it's just one of those things we weren't allowed to talk about. And when I was talking to Andrew Keene on his interview, he said, I said, well, I didn't write it for so long because it was embarrassing. He said, well, your grandfather committed murder, of course. I said, that wasn't the embarrassing thing. That just happened, but it was just kind of embarrassing to, so I guess that's why I never even considered writing it. But the feedback that I've gotten from people that knew me my whole life that had no idea has just been great. And even family members that didn't know that, talked about how wonderful Dad and Pete were, have been just so supportive about it. So it
That's
was
great.
probably, I don't think I could have written it before now.
And what was it? What was the catalyst that made you know you needed to get this book out and put it into the world?
Well, plain and simple, when my mom and I are gone, mom has just turned 80. When she and I are gone, this story is going to be lost forever. So I just thought it was a good time. And I didn't foresee it actually, I didn't foresee the feedback that I would get from agents and publishers, that were, and I thought all this time, all I had to do was write about my hillbilly childhood. Who knew? Who would have thunk that? So, but
Yeah.
no, the timing really, I figure if I don't tell it now, it's going to be lost forever. And I think, to be honest, most people have a story out there that, they could write. As somebody asked me in an interview, what do you want people to take away from this? I said that it is surviving that needs telling. People think that, well, you survived this horrible childhood and you went on to become a doctor or a lawyer or a senator. I don't think that part matters. I don't care if you become a waitress.
Yeah.
The surviving, I think, is the story that needs telling. So
Yep.
everything just kind of came into place. And what happened, to be honest with you, there's a fellow here that has a website on Facebook called DeKalb County, Alabama Historical Group. He started several years ago, and he posts these old newspaper clippings, some going back to the 1800s. And it's just very interesting. And so I always look at his page to see what he's found that's interesting. And a couple of years ago, I pull up the page, and there's an article from 1962 where my grandfather shot and killed his son-in-law over potatoes. And he posted there, and I messaged him. I said, that was my grandfather. And he just like, well, tell me about it. What happened? And then more people started commenting on it, wanting to know what the deal was. And I thought, I need to tell this story before it goes away forever. Yeah.
Yes. I am the storyteller, the story keeper and the storyteller of my family. And I feel exactly the same. I'm the last. I mean, there may be some obscure people here and there that know parts of it, but I'm the last one that knows all of it. And it is important for me to have it down, so that it doesn't get lost and forgotten. And so you finally left your small town and you lived away for 33 years, and then you returned to your hometown. What pulled you back?
That was always my plan. This was always home. I always say that home is where you know where to fish. And I never fished in Milwaukee. I never fished in Montgomery. I never fished at Auburn. The other places I lived, I come home to fish. So wherever where the fishing holes are, that's home. And this was always home. So even when I was in Milwaukee, I was writing for the local paper here. And of course, I got to do it from a perspective of someone outside the small town, and people I could compare Milwaukee to the sticks. And I say that I have a friend in New York City that's an author, and he kept convincing me, trying to convince me to do a blog. And I said, well, I guess I could write what it's like living in Milwaukee and growing up in the sticks. And he said, Milwaukee's still the sticks. And I went, well, I guess it is to New York. It's all Milwaukee has like 600,000. It's all perspective. When I think of sticks, I think of rural little towns. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I was writing for the local paper, even living in Milwaukee. This was just always home, and I can't imagine. It surprised me that I was gone so long, but I just loved, whatever I could get into, comedy wise, art wise, in the acting and whatever I could do. I just followed it, and I started my own publishing company 15 years ago. Then I published children's books, and I've published. We just did our 900th title recently. Wow. So I help authors at least bring because it's as hard as it is to get a full-length book published, through a big publisher and through a major New York City literary agent. It's much, much harder for a children's book, So I try to provide a good outlet for folks to get their books out there. Some of my authors have been very, very successful.
That's amazing. Amazing. After all that time away, how had your hometown changed?
Well, I think it's changed like every place has changed. It's become so political, but I think that's everywhere in the country. But it's the climate here has become disheartening, to say the least. Uh, I mean, there are people that you could be friends with your whole childhood. Suddenly, you're at odds because of who you might vote for, and it's just the craziest thing to me. When you think about, there was a famous author from the 1800s, and I cannot remember his name, but I just remember the quote, and he said, "Any man who could reach the office of the president of the United States doesn't deserve to be there." And it made so much sense. You have to owe somebody if you get to that level in politics. But suddenly, people in this country are ready to sell out best friends in their support for some of the worst people on the planet. Every party, don't get me wrong, I'm talking every party. If they're that high in politics, they're not a good person. I don't care, but they're willing to die for someone like that and shun somebody that would die for them. And it's like, what is wrong with this country? I don't know if we're ever going to get back. The one thing about the South, when I grew up here, your word was your bond. I mean, coaches, teachers, parents, grandparents taught you the value of honesty. And that has eroded over time. And that's the thing that hurts me the most. The South that I grew up with is not the same South that I see now. I know they're still there, still a lot of good people here, but those values have just been decimated, let's say.
Yeah, that's it is a hard time. Hard time to try to find common ground these days, for sure.
Common ground is there's much more common ground than there are uncommon ground. People just ignore it. I mean,
Very
anyway.
true. Very, very, very true. Um, your life is incredibly full, incredibly full. You are so busy. Are you working on another book? And would you continue down the nonfiction path?
Everybody keeps asking that question. I don't think I have another nonfiction in me. Uh, I wrote a book while I wrote a novel while I was waiting, because big publishers take so long. It takes like 14 months. Some of them take 18 months. Some take 2 years. It
Yeah.
takes so long, and that is exhausting. All the rewrites and proofing and editing, and of course they proof it like 7, 8 times, and they keep sending you this. I mean, it's exhausting. So while I was waiting on that, I actually wrote a novel that was in the back of my mind. It's called A Dog Named Mutt, and it's about a pit bull stray that finally finds a home, and it's told from the dog's perspective. And
Oh,
it's actually done really well. I just published it. It's for younger readers, and but it's a novel. So I wrote that, and actually I just finished another manuscript that's I don't know if I'll ever do anything with it, because it will upset a lot of people, especially people in this area. It's about a guy who finds himself waiting on judgment. It's Judgment Day. Everybody in the world is there basically waiting, and they're being called one at a time to go stand before the thrones, as John explains in Revelations. I'm not religious, by the way, but I like to read. I've read the Bible many times, so it matches what happens in Revelations, and it's Judgment Day, and this guy who gone to church his whole life is in for an eye opener, So I don't know if I'll ever do anything with it, but the rough first draft is complete. So I have other ideas, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure I won't. I don't have another nonfiction in me.
gotcha. Well, you certainly packed so much into this one. Just incredible. Uh, my final question for you is, have you read anything recently that you would recommend?
I have read a couple of books. I love to promote indie titles, uh, and I just read a Kindle book. Oh my gosh, I'm so. This is so horrible. I didn't know you were going to ask me that.
Sorry,
It's
I sprung it on you.
Letters from Home, I believe.
Okay,
Cindy, Cindy Stocks, something like that. It's really, really
okay,
good. She's an indie author. She just published it herself, but the book is doing really great. The Lie, a memoir of two marriages, catfishing and coming out by William Demeron. It's just excellent memoir. This guy finds out that they're using his picture to catfish women because he's such a good-looking guy, and these women keep contacting him, thinking they're in a relationship with him. He first thinks they're spammers, but they were real. And he finally, authorities finally tell him what's happening. And as I point out, I said, no one has ever used my picture for that. So, but those are two good books that I would recommend.
I have, I think it was Carrie that just put this in the chat, a fun and random note. One of our amazing Skylark customers was the editor for this book.
I saw that.
So that's amazing.
Yeah.
What a small world that they edited it. Your publisher sent it to me and said, I really think you will enjoy this book. And oh, did I. And now we're here talking about it, and just one of those beautiful book world synchronizations that I love to see. That is all the time we have tonight. Neil, this has been fascinating. Your book is, I know there's a lot of comparisons to Educated and Glass Castle, but there's another layer of depth to your book. And I think it's because of your alternating points of view in here that it's one of those that will stick with me forever and ever, as will our conversation, because there's so much to you and I want to follow all of the things you're doing. Thank you to everybody who joined us tonight. Once again, I would ask that if you are looking to get a copy of this book, get two, because anybody in your life that enjoys a memoir is going to love this book. And when you order them from Skylark Bookshop, you'll get a signed book plate to go with. And Neil, thank you for spending the time with us. This has just been fascinating. Absolutely. Everybody have a wonderful evening, and thanks for joining.